For decades, that boot didn't matter. Not at first. But that's how this started. I'm Beth, and this is I Must Have Forgotten, a podcast about memory, forgiveness, laughter, and the small moments that shape us. I was about 5 years old when I lost my little snow boot down Wildcat Creek in the wintertime. My sister Judith and I had walked down to the third cul-de-sac of East Tip Heights and cut back into the woods like all the neighbor kids did. We brazenly sashayed through someone's backyard to reach the creek, which we pronounced crick, and sat down to rest on a fat fallen tree next to the moving water. It was a fairly easy trip starting out. Little kids have boundless energy when they're fed and dry, excited and motivated on their mission of play. But it was a long walk through the snow for my short little legs, and I was getting tired. It was snowy, cold enough to numb little fingers, but not cold enough to freeze the crick. I told Judith I had snow in my boot, and my leg was cold, the kind where it makes the skin burn. She told me it was my own fault for stomping through all the drifts like I always did. The snow was higher than the boot. I always came home with wet pants and frosty feet, a little fabric-wrapped popsicle. Judith, who was 4 years older, took my boot off, careful not to pull off the bread bag that we always wore over our socks, and shook the snow out of the bottom of it. She said if I left it off for a few minutes, it would dry out. Huh. Then she set the boot on the slippery tree bark next to me. She wiped the snow off and tried to dry my bright red leg with her mittens. And we both turned our heads just in time to see the boot fall off the tree and ingloriously plop into the creek, like it had somewhere better to be. We both flapped our arms like two baby birds about to leave the nest and unsurprisingly caught nothing. No boot, no flight, no change in our unfortunate situation. We knew we were in trouble as the boot bobbed off out of reach and around a bend, gone forever. Well, at least it had a good run. If my foot had been cold in the boot, it was positively icy in just the bread bag held up with the rubber bands Mom had secured it with before we left the house. Bread bags. Indiana's Scotch guard for feet. She hadn't known where we were headed, but she always wrapped me up all snug and cozy before letting us leave in the wintertime. She was definitely going to notice that I was returning less equipped than when we had headed out. We lived just a few houses off of what was then Heath Road, now East County Road 300 North in Tippecanoe County, Indiana. And it was quite a ways from the scene of the crime. So off my sister and I went, from the creek, through the yard, to the third cul-de-sac, from there along the side of the road back to the warmth of home, where Mom was fuming, but also happy I hadn't fallen in with the boot. Torn between whether to yell at me or give me burnt peanut butter cookies. All of Mom's cookies were burnt. 3/4 of a mile trudging with a muddy wet sock stuffed inside a torn bread bag. My foot was a block of petrified wood by the time we got home. No wonder I turned out to be such a princess, the Duchess of Bread Bag Socks. I say that with a smirk, since princess is the last word that would describe me. I was always in the dirt. Mom said when I was a toddler she would put me on a blanket in the front yard and would come back later. By the way, parents used to leave their kids alone sometimes. The world has gotten crimier since then. But Mom would come back and I would have a little pile of clean rocks on the blanket. I had been picking them out of the driveway and washing them in my mouth. Toddler rock soup. Good. Judith was the rebellious one. I was the rule follower. Trouble was rare for me, but there's a first time for everything. Boots don't grow on trees, after all. Judith was in more trouble than me. She usually was, and being older, she had been in charge at age 9. But it was 1971. Parents sent us out of the house, sometimes with shoes. They told us to drink out of the garden hose if we got thirsty. They had no idea where we were going and just expected that we would remember to come back when our bellies told us it was time to eat. They didn't know what we were doing, probably would have had a panic attack if they'd known some of the things we got up to. The start of writing these vignettes wasn't planned. I never sat down thinking anyone would be interested in my story. Most of my writing went into my true crime podcast, until one day I had a flash of a memory about that little piece of winter footwear vanishing down Wildcat Creek. It was a small moment from childhood, but for some reason I felt compelled to write it, to remember it, to tell it like a witness. When the boot story was finished, I set it aside with no plans to add to it. But it wouldn't leave my mind. I remembered and wrote another section, then another, still with no ambition toward a full memoir. Some of the memories made me laugh with the absurdity. Others left me teary-eyed and unable to read what I'd typed. But with each memory I put down, something shifted. It began to feel like forgiveness. Seeing my mistakes and social blunders from the viewpoint of a reader reminded me that all of us deserve compassion, even towards ourselves. To the complex and precious people who appear in these memories, if you were kind to me, thank you. If you were cruel, I forgive you. If I wronged you, I'm sorry. You shaped me, whether you meant to or not. You live in these stories and I carry you still. And in writing these chapters, I've come to see us all more clearly. Not as villains or saints, but as humans doing the best we knew how. It's been a gift to remember what I thought I must have forgotten. Many names, including those of my family, have been changed. Not to obscure the truth, but to honor it. To protect privacy, preserve emotional well-being, and safeguard the integrity of the archive. Each pseudonym has been chosen with care. I was born into a family already in motion. The momentum of young parents and new lives, all of us learning how to become ourselves and how to find our place in the family and the world. I was the second daughter to my mother, and the first, Judith, had been tenderly adopted by my father. From the beginning, he treated us both with equal fatherly love, and together we formed a small, sturdy unit. Of course, triangles are sturdier than rectangles, but it was a long time before I would understand the basics of structural design. Mom and Dad built a house in a neighborhood outside of Lafayette, Indiana, East Hip Heights. Our street didn't even have a name, only an address. Rural Route 4, Lafayette, Indiana. I don't think we'd even begun using our zip code with any regularity yet. Across the street lived a girl named Margaret, but I called her Maggie. She was my best friend. She had pretty blonde hair and knew everything. Well, to me it seemed she did. I was happy to defer to her advanced age. She was 9 months older than me, 9 months wiser. Back then, local phone calls only required the last 5 digits. To reach Maggie, I'd dial 93224 instead of the full 589-3224, and it would go through just fine. Simpler times, simpler numbers. But that number, 589-3224, still lingers in my memory like a song I never meant to memorize. I was at Maggie's house almost daily. The first time she invited me to spend the night, I got homesick, and her mom, Janice, had to call my mom and tell her I wanted to come home. I was embarrassed to be too little for a sleepover, but I still wanted to sleep in my own bed. What if Taffy the cat or Casey the dog missed me? Well, Casey slept outside, so he probably didn't know one way or the other where I was. Maggie had dozens of horse figurines. Delicate things she insisted were very valuable. If I broke one, she warned me, on every visit,
"These horses are very expensive. If you break one, You have to pay me a lot of money.
So I was very careful not to break one. I was not employed. I had no money. My whole life savings amounted to a blanket full of clean rocks from the driveway. Her dad, Harry, was a Navy veteran and ran a tight ship. The kids' bedrooms were painted with sand paint. It was rough and gritty, maybe to discourage touching the walls or taping up posters. But this was the late 60s, and posters hadn't quite entered the toddler zeitgeist. There was no Barney, no SpongeBob, not even Sesame Street yet. We watched Captain Kangaroo, but he didn't come with merchandise. Can you imagine? Yikes. It's a real throwback to how little visual culture and clutter we had back then. No overload of licensed superheroes, no branded childhood, no 40 options for breakfast cereal. It never occurred to us to fixate on these things. Just Captain Kangaroo, a man with bangs carrying an enormous keyring. My family attended Buck Creek United Methodist Church with my mom's mom. Buck Creek was just a few miles away, and later in my childhood, my sister and I, sometimes with our friends, would ride our bikes along those country roads, cars barreling past at 80 miles per hour, just to visit Grandma's house in the middle of her workday. She wasn't home, of course, and Grandpa never recognized us without Mom there. We were just...
Those damn kids in the driveway.
One time a neighbor of theirs came outside and called me by my mom's name. She hadn't been my age in 20-some years. I guess they must have been confused, or in a time warp. But in small towns, especially ones past their prime like Buck Creek, time folds in on itself. You're not just yourself, you're someone's daughter, someone's friend, and maybe just a passing resemblance is enough to spark the connection. I reminded her of some mischief my mom had gotten up to in the 1950s. Grandma was a receptionist and phone operator at the Lafayette Journal and Courier newspaper. When teachers mentioned the newspaper in school, I felt quiet pride. I had a connection. Sometimes I go into work with her and sit with her behind an enormous desk that had a door into it, watching her nimbly juggle a dozen things at once.
Lafayette Journal and Courier, can you hold? Thank you. Lafayette Journal and Courier, how may I direct your call? Thank you. Thank you for holding. How may I direct your call? Thank you.
All of this while people continuously walked in from the street. I ate candy out of the bowl while Grandma performed like one of the flying Walendas on that phone system and all of its buttons and lights. It never stopped moving. Grandma never stopped to take a breath. My dad's parents lived in Lafayette. My dad and his dad worked together at a place called Ross Gear. Grandma worked in food service at St. Elizabeth Hospital. I felt she was oddly disloyal because of that. I'd been born at Home Hospital, but I never mentioned it. People make impossible choices to survive, right? I thought both of my grandmas were old when I was 3. They were just over 50. Women now, just over 50, are still sex symbols. It's amazing how much older that generation seemed at the same age as my generation has reached. Compare photos side by side, and it's doubly evident. Maybe because of better sun protection, skin creams, or because we weren't raised to think we were old as soon as we turned 30? They wore age like a compulsory uniform. Today, we wear ours like a costume and change it up with our moods. Women now aren't boxed up in mothballs and crammed into the attic at 45. My little brother Tommy arrived in 1969. He was nothing short of adorable. He had the chubbiest face in the world and eyes like chocolate drops. Mom called him Chocolate Drops when she wasn't calling him Matthew, his middle name. I don't know why his first name was Tommy. He was a sweet little boy, and he stayed a sweet little boy. Tommy had some hand-eye coordination issues that his doctor wanted my parents to work on. So Mom bought a softball, wrapped it up with string, and hung it from the ceiling in the middle of Tommy's bedroom. Just low enough that she could gently swing it while he lay on the floor beneath it, reaching up to grab at it with his chubby, slobbery little hands as it passed overhead. A low-tech pendulum of maternal love. While the world was telling women to grow old quietly and not cause a ruckus, Mom swung a ball from the ceiling and taught her little boy to reach. She was never one to let us be limited by what someone else thought. She taught all of us to reach for more than what the world said we deserved. To be resilient, not to give up, to solve our own problems with creativity. I think it must have helped. His coordination seems perfectly normal now. Judith and I were often dressed almost exactly alike for occasions like Easter. Matching patent leather shoes, black purses, white gloves, and little hats. In 1969, women and girls still dressed formally for church on Easter. Men still showed up in suits and ties. After the service, we'd go to the Buck Creek Easter egg hunt behind the church. I usually managed to tramp through the one remaining mud puddle from the spring rain, and my little shoes and white tights or ruffly ankle socks would be slightly less pristine when I came back with my haul of plastic eggs and candy. One time in that church, the minister said something that made Mom laugh. My mom doesn't hold back when she laughs. She throws her head back like a little kid and just lets it all out. It's something childlike and beautiful about her, so real and genuine. Something less real about her back then was her synthetic hair. A lot of women wore wigs in 1969. It gave them easy hair options without styling, a quick way to get out of the house. They didn't have to dye their hair if they wanted a different color. Wigs were very, very common. Mom was a fan. Less common was having a minister say something from the pulpit so hysterical that parishioners would throw their heads back in laughter while seated in the pews on Sunday. But on that particular Sunday, Mom erupted into one of her joyful bursts, head thrown back like a hoodie in a hurricane, laughter ringing into every corner of the church, and in that moment her wig promptly plopped off onto the feet of someone in the pew behind her. Imagine the chagrin of having to pick up someone's hair and return it to her with a solemn show of respect.
Excuse me, miss, I believe this is your hair.
Mom probably knew everyone in the church, so maybe they weren't too surprised. I don't remember this happening, but I've heard the story so many times that I feel like I do. Does that count? I didn't set out to write a memoir. I just remembered a boot, a red leg, a bread bag, and a creek that didn't freeze. And somehow that boot bobbing away down Wildcat Creek opened the floodgates. I remembered Maggie and her horse figurines, the sand-painted walls we weren't supposed to touch, her 5-digit phone number, the church where my mom laughed so hard her wig fell off, and the way we dressed like little ladies for Easter, only to come home with mud on our roughly white ankle socks and chocolate on our faces, which Mom probably wiped off with spit on her hanky. These stories aren't just memories, they're symbols of who we were, who we became, what our lives taught us, and the laughter that came with it. Thank you for listening. These are my memories, and maybe they echo yours too. I must have forgotten, but I remember now. Sound design for this episode includes excerpts from MuseHub and Pixabay. These audio textures help carry the memory, shape the emotional arc, and are honored with gratitude here.